welcome back to another episode of Quarantined Coaches. I went overnight from Lincoln, Nebraska to Eugene, Oregon, and I am here with Coach Angier from the University of Oregon. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad you're wearing that because you guys always have the best gear, so I was hoping you would wear something that looked cool.
Yeah, well, I wish I had a cool background like you. I've been trying to figure that out, but I haven't been able to do it yet. So
what do you mean?
I've got some work to do.
All you have to do is go to the field. I'm at the field. All right. So what is it that, you're recruiting me, and why should I go to Oregon?
I just think from a resource standpoint, I don't think there's too many places that are better in the country. I know on the West Coast, one of the very unique things about Oregon is the fact that it's a lot of those schools on the West Coast are in major cities, and so you don't really get that college experience, that college town feel. I do think Oregon is similar to like an SEC or a Big 12 school where it's in a smaller town, a college town. So you're going to get that awesome college experience. We had at one point this last year, we had football was in the top 10, men's basketball was in the top 10, and women's basketball were in the top 10. So it's a campus where usually, most of the sports are usually pretty successful. So I think it's a pretty cool opportunity and cool experience for kids coming here, to get to be in an environment like that.
Why are the sports so successful? Are there that many good athletes in the Northwest? Is it the facilities, the money being pumped in there? Are you able to pull kids from over? Like, why are the sports so good?
That's a good question. I think that, there's a few reasons. I think one is what I just said is it's a completely different experience, I think, than you get across the entire West Coast. I think that, just the town itself, there's a couple other places like that on the West Coast, but I think it's unique, which allows us to be able to recruit, off a different platform than everybody else. And then there is good athletes in the Pacific Northwest, and a lot of times they're overlooked just because there's not a ton of schools up in the Pacific Northwest. So these kids need a place to go, and not a lot of people come to the Pacific Northwest to go recruiting because it's so far away from everybody else. It's isolated. So I think that we do find, some diamonds in the rough and get the kids that are flying under the radar because of that.
Oregon seems to, I remember when they started to have all the uniforms, it was kind of a running joke, like, oh, you could just get a bunch of nice uniforms and get recruits that way. But it actually worked. And it put is that fair to say? Like, what they started doing to appeal to kids with uniforms and facilities, like they were very forward thinking in that a decade ago, right?
Yeah, I agree. I've been bouncing around. I was at the South Dakota State University where I played, and then was at North Dakota State University, and then from there was at Sacramento State University. So this was my first year at Oregon, but I remember thinking when I was coaching at those places that Oregon really just did a really good job of branding, their program and putting themselves on the map with that. I remember thinking that, 15 years ago. And so I agree. Yeah, it's been cool to be a part of this past year.
What kind of, I know you guys have the athletic facilities that I've seen, at least on videos and TV and whatnot, are awesome. What are you using with your pitchers there, technology-wise, facility-wise? Where do you feel like, hey, we might be ahead of the game on this?
I think everybody's got access to, a lot of the technology now. I don't know if ahead of the game is the right word, but we have TrackMan in the stadium for games. We use that in games and then scrimmages in practice. And then we use Rapsodo in every bullpen, as do a lot of programs. But our hitters use Blast. So we have access to all the technology. That is one thing, coming from some mid-major programs I worked at where you don't have the funds and the resources to just have everything at your disposal. We in our cages, we have hit tracks. We use Blast. Pitchers have Rapsodo in the bullpen, and then we have TrackMan on the field. So I think we got all our bases covered as far as the technology goes.
For you, I know they're all useful, and you're thankful that you have all of them. But for you personally, which one do you find most valuable to helping your pitchers develop, and why?
Rapsodo, and I think that just having it in the bullpen. You hear the argument new school versus old school with these kids, and the answer is I think there's some kids that are old school and some kids that are new school, and I think as coaches it's our job to figure out how to coach those guys. We have guys that are just slobbering at the mouth for that information from Rapsodo, and so sometimes with those kids you need to pull the reins back a little bit, and then you have kids that aren't even interested in it, and you can give them some information that helps drive a point home, whether it's with a release point or a grip on a pitch. And I think that's, really useful. I think it's finding the balance though, between, how you can help each individual, because they're all going to be different. Some guys are going to be really interested in that information, and I think it can really help them because that's how they understand things. We're dealing with I think the generation of kids that we're coaching right now is a very process-oriented generation. They grew up in pitching labs or in a cage, doing lessons with a pitching coach or hitting coach. Whereas, 25 years ago, that wasn't the case. I mean, kids weren't, doing all these lessons as they got older and were developing in the game as youngsters. And so I think that because of that, these kids are really in love with the process. And the nice thing about Rapsodo is it's a process development tool. It's, you're trying to get a result, but it actually measures the process. If you're working on something with your delivery, it measures that for that kid and can give him, attainable goals, for the next couple of weeks that he's working on, whether it's just being more consistent with a release point or, pitch development with a certain pitch and grips, you name it. But I think it does allow us to measure that process for these kids.
Would you say that the technology has made your job easier as a coach or more difficult to coach these kids? In a sense, like when I say more difficult, like you have a lot of learning to do as well and a lot of data now to process and things like that.
Yes and no. I don't think it's made. I think the management of how we give access to the information is obviously you didn't have to deal with that in the past, so that's made it more difficult, because I don't think it's one of those things where you got to protect those kids too. I mean, an 18-year-old kid, not every 18-year-old kid's ready to take on all the information that you can give them with Rapsodo and all the different technologies that we use. So I think that giving it to them in digestible doses is really important. But I think that'd be the only way it's difficult. I think it's made it easier to coach certain individuals because me just telling a kid, hey, you need to get more on top of it, on your breaking ball, just get more on top of it. That doesn't work for some kids. Some kids need to see, okay, this is my release point, my release height, my release side on that pitch, and this is that speaks to them more than me telling them to get on top of it or do something different with their hand position on the ball.
How do you work to improve your guys most? I'm guessing you use all of these, the weight room, the long toss, the weighted balls, things like that. But for you, which one do you maybe spend more time doing?
I think the throwing program has to be king over everything you're doing from a pitching development standpoint. So we really, really try to carve out a good chunk of time at practice every day on game days, to where our guys have really as much time as they need to throw. And there's a lot of freedom as far as how much they're going to throw and all that. That's up to them. But we really do try to create a space where there's some freedom in that. And our head coach does a really good job, Mark Wazakowski, of allowing me that freedom, because it can, hinder practice a little bit if you're always having to carve out 45 minutes for the pitchers to get their throwing in. I know that, that can be annoying to some coaches. So, but I mean, he allows us to do it. And I think it's great for our pitchers to know that, when they're out there playing catch and they're doing their throwing program, they're not doing it during batting practice when balls are being hit into them, or, they're not on a time crunch to get it done. I think that's important because, I don't know if you pitched, but when you're doing something, you're out there throwing, and you know that there's something that you got to get to next, and you're under a certain time allotment. I think that just naturally you're going to shorten your throwing program up that day. Or if you got balls being hit into you during batting practice, I think it does shorten it up. And so I think that, carving out a time in the practice schedule where our guys have as much time as they need to do their throwing, I think is really vital to their development, because I do think that's where you develop the command. And honestly, with our pitching staff, we work on a lot of our mechanics, in the throwing program.
The fact that you asked me if I pitched just told everybody who's a fan of me that you don't pay attention and you don't even know anything about me. That this is the first interaction. I am clueless when it comes to pitching. I mean, I shouldn't sell myself as short as I do, but talking to you guys, yeah, I constantly am talking about like, nope, don't know what you're talking about, but sounds good, and I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy it. So when you are looking at your pitchers midway through the season and you are evaluating who's doing well, who needs improvement, what's the first statistic you're going to go look at?
I think whip and strikeout to walk ratio are two that I really pay attention to. I mean, just, I guess in a way to answer that simply, I mean, whip is obviously you're not dealing with a lot of people on base. That's if nobody's on base, you're pitching good. So,
Right.
And then the strikeout to walk ratio is an important one, because I think in an era where the strikeout has become so important to these kids, and we know that it's good, it's one less out your defense has to make. So strikeouts are important, but I think that if you make them the be all end all, the walks can climb up with it, and you want to keep those down. So I think having a 3-to-1 or better strikeout to walk ratio is an important step that I look at with our guys.
How much do you guys practice PFPs and bunt defenses in first and thirds with your guys, pickoffs and all that?
We practice it every day. Now, a lot of times it's going to be dry because we are trying to protect the arms. And I think that, gosh, man, I joke around with guys. PFPs made my arm more sore than pitching at times, when I was playing. So, and I still remember that. Like, I remember coming off of practice and like, man, my arm didn't hurt after I did my throwing program. It hurts after I did the PFP. So that's something that I try to manage, and do it on heavy throwing days or bullpen day, and not days after, day before you throw a bullpen or pitch in a game. But I think it's something that you got to work on in one of those areas every single day. Bunt defenses, it seems like less and less people are bunting now. But when they do bunt, it's in a really, it's an important point in the game where you got to get that out. And so I think, you got to work on that stuff, daily for sure.
And pickoffs?
Pickoffs, we really keep that to just in the bullpen. I think that's the best time to do it. You're good and hot. It's going to be a good max effort pickoff move at that point. And so, we'll do it, during the bullpen, at the end of the bullpen, but just turn the pitcher around so that his back's facing the catcher basically, and have the catcher stand up and rifle some pickoffs.
How many pickoffs moves would you like a starting pitcher to have, one of your starting guys?
2 to 3. I mean, we try, when we're working on it, we're really just trying to work on the best move. I think it's hard enough for these guys to, have one really good move. So I think that, trying to have 5 different pickoff moves is probably a little extreme. So I think, as they master one, and you have maybe a guy comes in with one good one, I think you can start to work on, some different variations of that. But I think that, at this age, I think we're really just trying to get them to have one good one. And, a lot of times it's footwork and athleticism that allows them to have a good move in the first place.
How messy can a college practice get when it comes to these little things, the PFPs and the pickoffs and the bunt Ds? I mean, we know what high school one looks like. Like that could literally go on for 2 hours before you can get 3 straight outs. And I think we think of college as, oh, everything's smooth. These guys are like pros, but they're still kids. Like, how many little mistakes do you feel like you're still talking to little leaguers, at a college level? Not necessarily where you are now, but in your career.
Yeah, no, I think if you're looking at when a practice gets most messy, it's when you're doing the things that, don't normally happen within a game, on an every pitch basis. Like when you're doing PFPs, and you got pitchers, maybe some bad athletes that are running around trying to pick up a bunt and rifle it to second base. I think that's when practice gets messy. Rundowns, when you're doing things that don't happen all the time, I think that's when, you'll see some things that you chuckle at.
Yeah. When building a staff and looking at, who you're going to start to begin the year, how important is seniority in the experience that guys have? Or are you simply saying, hey, man, best stuff, let's go?
I think experience is important. And I think I think it's all important. Experience stuff, ultimately we're just trying to win games. So, when you go through your fall and then you go through, that January, February preseason, the scrimmages that you're doing in those, I think that usually it's a pretty clear understanding of who needs to fall where, in the rotation, and, what's going to give us the best chance to win games. Seniority is not something that I don't really think about that. I think about just results, like who's gonna get it done for us, and trying to set guys up to be successful. I think that that's our job as coaches, is to put these guys in position to be successful, and sometimes that's structuring a rotation that's going to give our team the best chance to win the most games on the weekend. If you got one left-handed pitcher and you want to put him between the two righties, there's stuff like that you can do. But seniority is not one that I ever think about. I mean, when I was at Sacramento State, we had back-to-back years of a freshman All-American starting pitcher. So those guys had no experience, and seniority wasn't a deal there. We just wanted to win and put the best guy in there.
Closers, what are some ideal characteristics of a closer? I mean, I know that for a long time it was who can throw the hardest and get out there. That's kind of changed a little bit.
Yeah. No, you got to be able to. I do think it's important to be able to strike somebody out when you're talking about your closer. You're dealing you got to get 3 outs, and maybe it's a one-run game, and you got guys on base, and it's nice to be able to have a strikeout in your bag. And I think that's the one guy that you want to have stuff. I mean, you're looking for a hard breaking ball and a good fastball, and then ultimately it comes down to trust. Though you want to be able to trust that guy. He's got to be a guy that can bounce back, because if you have a closer out there that has one bad outing, and that's just gonna snowball into 3 more. You can't.
Right. That's interesting to me, because, at a pro level, it's different. You're dealing with men, but at a college level, it's like blowing the save in a big game. Like, these are 19-year-old.
Huge deal. Yeah.
It's a huge deal. So, like, how do you, build that back up, or build the confidence in that guy? Because a pro, you're just like, okay, he's a pro. He'll figure it out the next night, and if he blows a save, then he'll figure it out 2 nights later. But like with a college kid, how do you get them over that hump?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I think you just got to keep believing in them and try to get them right back out there. Hopefully, if a guy blows a save on Friday, hopefully on Saturday you have another save opportunity for him that you can hand him the ball. I think that just showing them that you believe in them that way is the way to give them confidence. But at the end of the day, they need to be successful. That's what's going to breed the most confidence. So,
I mean, these guys, now I'm just thinking about it. Like, It's got to be a constant battle to keep everybody's confidence up with a bunch of 19-year-olds. No, I mean, across the board.
Yeah, it is. I think, especially with today's day and age of social media, and they're in a constant mode of comparing themselves to somebody else. I think that confidence is a factor that it's hard to coach for one. I think it's probably the hardest thing to coach is to get a guy to be more confident, and ultimately they need to have success on the field to be confident. And so, the best thing we can do is to be positive with them, and show them we love them, and that we believe in them, and then put them in situations where they can be successful. You know, give them the ball in a situation where they can do well, and then build off that.
Academics in athletics at a public state university. How important is academics? I mean, 2.8 GPA and a kid throwing 95 miles per hour versus a 4.0 GPA and a kid throwing 87 miles an
Yeah, we're really looking for both. We want 95 and a 4.0.
hour. Of course.
No, I think academics are important because I do think that there's a correlation between how hard somebody's going to work in the classroom and on the field. And so, we are really looking for guys that have over a 3.0 GPA. And then if you're dealing with a high school or junior college kid that you're recruiting, and the GPA is 2.4, and obviously you think he's good, or else you're not recruiting him. I mean, then you start to weigh, well, if he's got a 2.4 GPA, it doesn't seem like he's too interested in school, and is he even going to show up on campus because he's going to get drafted and just want to go play pro ball right away. So I think that that's something that we weigh heavily. I think we're always looking for high achievers. On our campus, there's academic money that can be made if you have good GPA and good test score as well. So that's part of our scholarship package.
That's what I tell a lot of guys is like GPA is not, for a lot of you, it's not about whether or not you'll be admitted to the school. It's about what kind of academic money can you get, because then that changes your value to the baseball team. Essentially, you guys are dealing with a salary cap, right? And you're trying to make the most of it. So good grades is going to get them more money there, cost you less money, and brings their value up to you. Would that be correct to say? Am I right on that, or?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Perfect. That's what I need from this show. I need quotes, sound bites like that is what I need. How does geography impact recruiting? I mean, you really only have one direction you can go, whereas a guy in Georgia or team in Tennessee, they can go in every single direction to find kids.
For us, we're going to try to do most of our recruiting on the West Coast. We'll go to the big events in Georgia, Florida, North Carolina in the summer, but it does affect it as far as in the fall. I would say is when it really has an effect, when you're managing, practice schedule and getting out recruiting. I would say that's when you're going to see the greatest effect on, we're going to have to miss a practice here possibly if we leave on this day. But I think that, if you're in Arizona, I think makes recruiting a lot easier, or if you're in Florida, because all the events are coming to you.
Where does velo rank to you when recruiting a high schooler?
It's part of it, but I would say that it seems like, in the pitching world, velocity has become less important for me because it's become easier to develop. I mean, you're seeing it across the country. I mean, velocity, where pitchers are throwing harder than they ever have, and I think pitching coaches and strength programs have figured out how to train a pitcher to get them to throw harder. So that's something that I think you can add velocity in college. You're getting them at the right time. They're 18 to 22 years old, so they're becoming a man at that point. It's easy to add some strength and add some weight, and then couple that with maybe helping their delivery a little bit in certain areas, and I think that they're gonna throw harder. So I would say that it's not as important as a guy that can spin a good breaking ball. a guy that has really good command of 2 to 3 pitches, in particular the fastball. And then we're always trying to find makeup. I mean, I think that's the toughest thing to, to try to figure out in the recruiting process is what a guy's makeup is. Is he mentally tough? How does he handle failure? Because a lot of times you don't get to see that kid enough. I mean, it's in pro. I watch the pro scouts, and I mean they're on kids for years, months, scouting a kid, so they do know what that kid's makeup is, by the time they draft them. Whereas in college, best case scenario, sometimes we might see a guy 5 times,
Right.
And I think that's where it becomes tough, and you really got to dig in on the high school coaches, and trust them. And you got to have a lot of phone conversations with the kid and ask them the tough questions that,
Right. I find that interesting. You kind of answered where I was going to go, but there's like you said, like every coach wants to see their recruits fail at one point. They just want to see them in a bad situation and things not going well. But then at the same time, like you said, you only get to see them a few times. So if they're failing too many times, then they're not a recruit for you. So it's kind of, that was going to be my question, is how do you figure some of that out? And I guess you said rely on high school coaches is a big part of that.
Yeah. I think we try to, get in touch with as many people as we can that are around the kid, in a coaching capacity. And I think that, if the kid if he doesn't have a good makeup, somebody's going to give you a red flag somewhere in there. And then I think just talking to the kid and trying to have, a lot of conversations with him, and you can learn about kids. They'll tell you.
So many high school kids are sitting out saying they're hurt, but like they're not having surgery, right? Like
Right.
There's soreness. So like how much are you able to kind of dig in and figure out, is a guy really hurt and what's a problem?
Well, yeah, and there you go. I mean, I want kids that want to play, and I want kids that want to play the games. I do think that that's something that you're seeing more and more, is a lot of kids love training, but they don't like getting between the lines and having to compete and take the test, so to speak. So I think that and if a kid's never playing games, I mean, you start to wonder, like, does he not want to play games? He's always talking about I got a bullpen, or I got this, and I'm looking for guys that want to play and want to compete. And then, again, talking to the high school coaches, I think you can start to figure out, what that injury really is. Is it a serious one, or is it?
Yeah, these guys, I feel like their arms are sore or something, or and they're like at least where I'm at, right? And they need a break, and it's like
some of them do need a break.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to ask you, what kind of you're in a different climate, a different region. I don't know if they're playing as much as they are in the Southeast, but how much of a concern is the overuse of arms at the youth age for you?
It is a concern. I think that it's become a big deal, and so you're seeing travel coaches are doing a way better job of it than maybe they were in the past. I go to an event, and it's you don't see guys going out there, and it's good and bad. I mean, you don't see guys going out there for 7 innings, throwing complete games anymore, and then coming back 2 days later and doing it again. I mean, you do see it once in a while, but it's not as prevalent, I think, as it was. Now they're just going 3-inning stints. They're almost piggybacking with all their guys, kind of like they do in professional baseball and the minor leagues. But I think that it is a big deal that you got to pay attention to, because and these kids are throwing. I think the problem lies where they have a summer team they're playing on, then they're going to an area code tryout, then they're going to a showcase, and you just combine all these different things going on in this kid's summer schedule. And I mean, the coaches in some cases don't even know what he just did 2 days ago, because they're not coaching him 2 days ago. He's on like 3 different things. So that's where it gets tough.
If it were your son, what time of year would you take the break with him and say, you know what, we're not we're not playing in anything, trying out for anything, showcasing for anything, like when would be that time of year?
I think high school kid, I would take the break. Probably, I would allow him to do spring, summer, and fall, and then take a break in the winter, and try to give him enough time. 8 to 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks before his practices start up. For his high school season, to where he's ramping his arm back up.
But isn't that like, to me, like, that's crazy. That's like spring, summer, fall. That's longer than the major league season's going on almost. I mean, they're not throwing.
I wouldn't want it to get longer. So you're not playing as many games in the spring as a college team when you're in high school, and then
Right.
the summer. To me, it's all on innings. Like if I feel like he's cashed out at the end of the summer, then I'd say, hey, maybe no fall ball. But I definitely think that taking 10 weeks off a year, like where they're not even picking up a ball consecutively, is really important. And so I think you need to find that window of time where you can do that. And that goes into the kids playing multiple sports.
Right. Do you think it's more an issue of how much they're playing or a lack of the right training?
I think how much they're playing can be part of the problem. I mean, if you're on multiple teams, and I think that's the biggest issue right now, is you get kids that are playing on multiple teams, and the communication between those coaches is non-existent. So they don't know how to manage the workload of the kid when you have a kid playing on 3 different teams, and it's like, I don't know what he was doing 2 days ago, and all of a sudden you're throwing him, and he's throwing 4 innings in a game, and comes out and says, my arm's sore. Well, yeah, I pitched 3 innings yesterday for that team, and I think that's where the problem lies.
Do you use social media at all in recruiting?
Yeah, I think Twitter has become a pretty good place to, especially now during the quarantine time, to see some guys on video on Twitter, and so yeah.
And what happens on Twitter? You see a guy and then you just reach out. I mean, it's just really identifying names for the most part.
Identification, yeah. I mean, we're not going to offer a scholarship
Of
based off
course,
a Twitter video. And
do you have any success though? Like, what's like the success rate of finding a kid on Twitter, reaching out, and then not necessarily committing them, but getting serious in the recruiting process?
It's a good question. I haven't tracked it. I mean, I think that there's a lot of kids at Oregon. You're in Eugene. It's a little bit more isolated than being in LA or in Phoenix. From a recruiting standpoint. So I think you do need to rely on Twitter to get some names and identify some players, and then you just go down the channels from there of calling coaches, and then if it turns out to be what you're seeing on video, then you go see the kid in person.
Who was your favorite big leaguer growing up?
Well, I grew up in Seattle, so Ken Griffey Jr.
Oh my gosh, that's like 4 days in a row I got him.
Really? Yeah, I know him, and I liked him, and I liked Mariano Rivera on the mound.
Who's the scariest pitcher you think is out there? Do you think it's Randy Johnson?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be left-handed hitter stepping in the box against him. Yeah, gosh, that's a good question. Hater, I wouldn't want to face that guy right now.
Yeah, I always think Randy Johnson and Aroldis. Like, I would not, definitely as a lefty, but even as I don't want anything to do with that.
That crossfire from Hater is what would be funky. I wouldn't want to face that.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. What's the hitter you wouldn't want to face? Because you're worried that you're going to get a line drive right back in your dome.
Somebody on the Astros or the Red Sox, maybe.
Fantastic.
You probably know what's coming.
Fantastic answer. We'll end it right there. Coach Angier, thank you so much for doing this with us today. That was fun, man. It's always fun to be able to dip into different regions and learn stuff. So this was great. Thank you for doing it.
Josh, thanks for having me. Great show, man.